Our upcoming guest is Zak Malamed, a Democratic primary candidate for New York's 3rd Congressional District, which covers the North Shore and portions of Queens. At the age of 29, Zak is vying to replace George Santos, who is facing indictment, I don't know why I'm laughing, on a staggering 13 federal charges, including money laundering, fraud, and theft of public funds, among many others. During our conversation, Zak will share insights into his campaign, his affiliation with the New Democratic Movement, his views on George Santos, and details about his foundation, The Next 50, which is dedicated to supporting aspiring politicians under the age of 50. You can help him win by going to Zack, Z-A-K, for Congress, so ZackForCongress.com, and contributing whatever you can. And will you now join me in welcoming Zak Malamed? Hi, Zack. I'm so glad that you could join us. So you're a 3rd-generation New Yorker, and did you always live in the district you're living in?
Outside of the 3 years that I lived in the Bay Area near you, I have been a lifelong resident of New York's 3rd Congressional District.
And okay, this is just a little bit of a side, but since you have that depth in New York, can you please tell us how 4 street seats in New York flipped from Democrat to Republicans in 2022, and all in so-called Biden districts?
You know, look, here's the deal. In the 60 plus years that my family's lived in New York's 3rd Congressional District, a Republican has only won once before. And it was in 1980 during the Reagan Revolution that the Republicans won a single term. And so the reality here is that, in New York State, I believe that there are a lot of great individual actors within the Democratic Party who collectively reinforce bad behavior. In fact, that's a lesson that I took away from my time working at Facebook, where there are individual actors who collectively reinforced bad behavior. And as a result, that bad behavior really was a level of complacency. We believed that Democrats would win year in and year out. And here's the deal, up until 2020, my entire life in the town of North Hempstead where I live, Democrats had won. And then the pandemic hit, and that politics of stability transitioned to this politics of fear. And that politics of fear led to my town of North Hempstead, which, by the way, this congressional district is the wealthiest congressional district in the state of New York, the 4th wealthiest in America. It led from people transitioning from the politics of fear to this from the politics of stability to a politics of fear. And that actually didn't just take place at the town level, it didn't just take place at the New York City Council level. It also took place 7 days before George Santos was elected to Congress, when I stood in line for 30 minutes with my father to vote in a local library board race that we won by 7 votes to prevent book banners from taking over our public libraries.
You're kidding.
Now, mind you, this is the best public school district in the entire state of New York. And there was a threat to our public schools and our libraries being funded. And so this is a real threat that's taken place. But I still believe that the values of public education, the values of public safety, the values of making sure that women have the right to choose are still held by the majority of the constituents in this district. And what we need to do is transition from that politics of fear to a politics of hope. And that's why I chose to step up and run for Congress.
I love it. Well, this is your first time running at age 29. You've been involved in politics for at least a decade when you started your student voice. And then you also, that student voice became a national movement to make public education just, it sounds like, from what I've read about it. But was that your first foray into activism?
No, actually, it was in 2009. I was involved in student government, and at one point,
in high school, yeah,
I should clarify that.
Yes, exactly.
I had a parent come up to me and say, "Hey, we're going up to Albany in a couple of days for a New Yorkers Against Gun Violence rally, and I'd love for you to speak there." And I said to myself, "Guy from Great Neck speaking out against gun violence? I mean, yeah, of course I stand against gun violence, but why do you want me to speak?" Gun violence had been ravaging our country at the time, but it hadn't really quite hit home yet. And I took them up on the opportunity to speak because it's something I deeply cared about, but didn't feel like I had a personal connection to. And after speaking at that rally, I actually was offered an internship, and I worked for 4 years for my local assemblywoman. Knocked on my first doors in 2009 for my county executive. Was also the former congressman in this race. But little did I know, 11 years after speaking at that New Yorkers Against Gun Violence rally, that I would lose a friend to gun violence myself.
Oh, wow.
And, I think one of the lessons I take away from that experience is that the issues we advocate for today, even if they don't directly impact us now, may impact us at some point. And I feel like I have an obligation not only to myself, but to my peers, to my family, and to future generations to make sure we take action on the issues that clearly are ravaging our country right now, like climate change, like a lack of access that women have to their reproductive freedoms, and to the gun violence that is now the #1 killer of young Americans in this country. That is not, it's not a country you and I want to live in, right?
Yeah, right. Whoa. But then you started the Next 50, a donor group to fund people under 50 running for office. And one of the people that you supported was Elizabeth Slotkin in Michigan, and she won her U.S. House seat, and now she's running for Senate in Michigan. So one of the things I wanted to know is, and that's where I met you, is when you did your first, I heard you speak to a group of donors about that. But can you tell us what your vision was for this audience so that they know? And then to kind of work on that is, then how did you decide to run from, raising money to becoming a candidate yourself? And you've said some of that, but I'm just wondering how that happened, and that you're running against this high profile charlatan, which is a nice name for your opponent, George Santos, who's been indicted on 13 felonies related to his candidacy.
So I'd love to actually answer your question directly, but first, I got my first quote this morning of George Santos talking about me and my candidacy, and I'd love to.
Oh, yay! What is it?
He said, "Young kid, very energetic, very, very interesting. Don't know him at all."
Thank God.
Like, well, yeah. Well, first of all, thank God, but also, like, did he just give me a backhanded compliment?
I think he did.
I think he did. And it's kind of there's a meme that goes around where it says worst person in the world actually says something right for a change. I kind of feel like that's what happened this morning with this quote.
That's such a great quote for you.
Now, to answer your question directly, though, about the Next 50, look, I had, again, built my career in education advocacy because my grandmother moved to the congressional district that I'm running in, the community that I grew up in, over 60 years ago because of this promise of public education. And it's the reason my mother returned to this community to raise me and my 2 sisters. It's actually the reason that about 30% of this district is comprised of first-generation immigrants themselves, because people move there because of that promise of public education and because of how attainable the American dream has been for generations. And so from my vantage point, I actually, despite going to the best public schools in the country, didn't feel like my public education was as good as it could be. And so I launched, Student Voice to help students advocate for educational equity. I continued that work for one of the nation's most prominent philanthropists, and then furthered that work at one of the largest tech companies, Facebook. But what I realized in that process was that it mattered who was making decisions about students, teachers, and families. Because in the school building every single day, you have teachers and students confronting a broken immigration system, an unjust healthcare system, their communities being ravaged by climate change. And yet we expect the school buildings to solve for all of these problems. And I spent time focusing on raising math standards and, yes, improving the quality of our schools. But our schools are so much more than just what goes on in the school building. It's what happens in the community around them. And so that is what led to me launching the Next 50 in response to the fact that 50 years ago, conservatives came up with a plan to win. And by all measures, they have won, in large part by investing in their young people. In fact, in the last Congress, over 50%, or maybe even this Congress, over 50% of those who are 50 years old and under in Congress are Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, and my hometown Congressman, George Santos. And historically, most of the elected officials who are Republicans right now came through the same organizations. The conservative movement has cultivated them for decades. In fact, if you look at Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence, Grover Norquist, Karl Rove, we're talking about staffers and elected officials. They all came through the same pipeline because conservatives didn't take young people for granted. And I became concerned that young people were being taken for granted in this moment, especially given that the last presidential nominee, who's presently alive but is older than Joe Biden, is Michael Dukakis. We have not elected or had an opportunity for the next generation to step up and lead in this country. And so at the Next 50, we didn't want a lack of access to capital to prevent young leaders from being able to step up and lead. And so we built a donor network that became the #1 funder of young Democrats in the country, primarily in swing districts and states. And after doing this work in Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, I didn't really expect that the form of MAGA extremism I had to fight elsewhere to come home. And now it happens. And I chose to step up and run because I saw a Democratic Party that had been wholesale rejected locally. And it's time for fresh leadership that will restore integrity to the office that represents my hometown. And I could not be more excited by the challenge, as much as it was not something I was planning on when I launched the Next 50.
I bet. And the reality is that you really are Jewish. And what was it like for you when Santos lied and said he was, and in fact that his grandparents escaped the Holocaust?
Well,
how did that go over, and especially in your community that has a Jewish population?
One of the most Jewish congressional districts in the country, actually. And, the irony of George Santos's story is he lied about being Jewish. He lied about having relatives who experienced or survived the Holocaust. And he lied about having founded a nonprofit. And the irony in all of that is that the story he proclaimed to be his is actually my story. And,
So he actually even stole your story.
A chunk of it. I can't claim to have, lived in Brazil or been a drag queen or anything like that. That's not the part of my story that he stole. But the reality is, like, those pieces of the story, particularly that he was Jewish, particularly that he had relatives who survived the Holocaust, particularly that he founded a nonprofit. These are things that are deeply resonant in this district, in this community. And when people voted for him, first of all, I think they were voting for something new. If there's anything positive we take away from George Santos being elected, it's that people were simply just looking for something different. But also they felt connected to him and his story. We have one of the most diverse Jewish populations in the entire country, actually. We have the largest Persian Jewish population outside of Beverly Hills in my congressional district.
Whoa.
And you have the synagogue I belong to is eclectic. You have folks from the Middle East. You have folks from Iran. You have folks from Europe, all in the same congregation. It's extraordinarily rare to have that level of eclectic Jewish population within one synagogue. But then people realized it was all a lie. And it wasn't just a local embarrassment. It wasn't just a national embarrassment. It was an international embarrassment. People across the world know about George Santos. And the unfortunate reality is I live in a congressional district that is actually deeply proud of its history. That's not the unfortunate part, but we're deeply proud of our history, a community where F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote The Great Gatsby. We're a community where Whitey Ford and the Marx Brothers lived, and Jim Brown, the famous football player, grew up. We're a community where Natalie Portman, Judd Apatow, Howard Stern, Billy Joel, and Jerry Seinfeld all grew up. And actually on my block alone, you have my sister who has 2 million followers on TikTok. Then a little further up, you have Amanda Setton, who is on Gossip Girl. Then across the street, you have Aquafina. And then across the street from Aquafina, you had Sarah Sherman, who all grew up on that block, by the way.
You're kidding.
And Sarah Sherman's on Saturday Night Live, and she was my junior prom date. So
come on. That alone should elect you.
Right? And she was just elevated, actually, on the Saturday Night Live cast. It was announced today. But I say all of that because we have so much to be proud of. And yet now the community we live in, the communities many of us grew up in, we were raised in, is now stained by the reputation that George Santos has for being the fraud and the liar that he is and the embarrassment that he is.
Well, hopefully they're all ready to vote him out. He didn't have any money left anyway, so that might be a good thing. Yeah. But this week also has really impacted your race. Yeah. And I'm wondering if you could talk to us first about what has happened in general and with Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives when it's been in such disarray. Yeah. And any comments on them throwing out the speaker, the Republicans throwing out the speaker after 257 days, almost a record. Yeah. But what do you expect to bring to that chaos? And meanwhile, I do want to say that Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to nominate ex-president indicted felon Trump to be the Speaker of the House. So anyway, any comments on those? And then what can you bring to that chaos to help?
Yeah. Well, actually, to simply answer the question, when I win this seat, we're going to deliver the House majority for Democrats, and we're going to make Leader Jeffries Speaker Jeffries. And we know that it's funny, Republicans are trying to brand the Democrats as the Chaos Caucus. Are you
Don't you
kidding
love
me?
it?
Like, you guys can't get your act together whatsoever. They are not serious about governing. They're serious about grandstanding. And we need people in office who are serious about governing and delivering for the American people, full stop. We have a serious crisis at our borders right now that is affecting New Yorkers and costing us millions of dollars. We have a serious crisis when it comes to the cost of living in this country right now. We have a serious crisis as it relates to gun violence in this country, and the Republicans refuse to act. They have had the opportunity to act on comprehensive immigration reform since the Bush administration. They have not acted. They've had the opportunity to act on gun safety all the way back to Columbine. They have not acted. They have had the opportunity to act on the climate crisis dating back to Al Gore's term in the US Senate in the 1980s. They have not acted. So if we want people who actually take the issues facing our country seriously, we need to elect a Democratic majority to Congress. Full stop. End of conversation. And the Republicans are going to try and twist and turn this into something that it's not. And we need to hold their feet to the fire and show them that they have been incompetent and incapable of governing as long as they've been given power over the course of the past 2 decades.
Yeah, no joke. And I think that Santos is a great example of this. How his campaign manager, speaking of this week, pled guilty to lying, to stealing funds, et cetera, et cetera. And Santos, for his part, said she went rogue and he didn't even know what she was doing. And he's practically said, like Trump loves to do, I don't even know her. Who is she? It's really shocking.
Well, here's the deal with Nancy Marks, who was his campaign treasurer. Actually, she is a product of the extreme MAGA Republican Party. She has worked for literally nearly every single notable Republican elected official or candidate in the state of New York, including our most recent gubernatorial nominee, Republican nominee, Lee Zeldin. She is a product of and emblematic of the corrupt, chaotic, extreme MAGA Republican leadership in the state of New York. Every single Republican who tries to shed themselves of the fraudulent lie that George Santos represents is complicit in George Santos being a member of Congress representing New York's 3rd Congressional District. In fact, George Santos wasn't nominated once for the seat. He was nominated twice. They knew, we have evidence, documented evidence that they knew who he was, and yet they still chose to stand beside him and endorse him and support him and make him my member of Congress. That is a damn shame.
No, it's so bizarre. And in fact, it is so bizarre. How do you, I mean, I know that it's electing Democrats. Absolutely. Everybody out there, you have to vote for Democrats. I don't care what side you're on. You have to, if we're going to save our democracy, you have to vote for Democrats. But how do you imagine impacting this bizarre, anti-truth, anti-science, anti-everything of the other side, the corrupt, they talk about the Biden crime family. They're a crime whole, party. They have destroyed the Republican Party name. So I'm just wondering how you think you can impact it.
I will call out elected officials for their lies and mistruths at every single turn. But I also think it's incumbent upon the Democratic Party to not speak down and talk down to those who have been consumed by those lies and those half-truths. And I believe that my ability to listen to and hear out those folks, but also show them that, there are alternative and real, not alternative, real facts. I think that to the extent that I can do that, we will build a real coalition that recognizes that when I'm in office, when I'm in Congress, I'm governing to serve them. I'm governing to deliver for them. I'm governing to represent them. There is a reason that through this campaign, despite my long track record as a tried and true Democrat, I do have Trump supporters who are donors to this campaign, who are supporting this campaign.
Wow.
And look, that I haven't compromised my viewpoints one bit to earn their support. People trust that I'm going to be a voice for and have give an ear toward them and their concerns. And that's my obligation when I'm a member of Congress. It's at the end of the day, I am a Democrat who believes that Democrats are going to be the ones who deliver for the American people and whose values I share the most. But I'm not running for Congress to just be a Democrat in Congress. I'm running to represent and serve the interests of my community. And the minute that any elected official loses sight of that is the minute that they lose sight of the purpose and reason that they were sent to represent their community in Congress in the first place. It's a tall task we have ahead of ourselves to engage with the lies, especially propagated by a lot of these social media outlets. But that doesn't mean we talk down to the folks who have been consumed by them. They have every right, by the way, to be frustrated, for not feeling like they've been heard, for feeling like it's harder to make ends meet today than it was 5 years ago. And by the way, also for feeling less safe than it was 2, 5, 10 years ago. Because most of the facts bear some of that out. But that doesn't mean we need to spew hate. That doesn't mean that we have to other our community. And we need to come together to solve some of these problems. And Republicans choose hate over solutions. And I want to choose hope that drives us towards those solutions.
That's great. I have one more question, although that would be a great place to stop. But I'm going to ask you, one thing is that you're a young person and you've worked with young people as all of your career since high school. And so I'm wondering, with all the rising costs, with student debt, with all that is discouraging for the younger generation, for the 18 to 30-year-olds like yourself, how do you get the young people to vote and get engaged and believe in this? Although I do also want to do a caveat that they're actually more engaged than certainly my generation, which was the anti-Vietnam War generation. And we thought, oh, I know what, I'm going to protest because I don't like it. I'm not going to vote. So we got Nixon for 8 years. So I'm just wondering how you get the young people to get engaged.
Great question. Look, especially in a cycle where you're going to have people at the top of the ticket who are septuagenarians and octogenarians.
Yes.
We need to give folks something that they can look forward to and connect with and relate to and be excited about. That's part of what the Next 50 has been doing, right? Backing 50 candidates, 50 years old and under in some of these competitive swing districts and states. And these people won, by the way. I think I left out earlier. We had an 80% success rate last cycle.
Yeah. Can you say that again? Because I think, when I said Elizabeth Slotkin, she was in a Republican red district and she won and she won and she's going to win again. She's going to become the senator from Michigan.
But she won a Trump district. She won a Trump district.
Yes.
And the young candidate who spoke to the interests and needs, and she was of the community, much like I am. She was of the community, and people trusted her. She didn't talk down to folks. She brought the community together. And I think there's a lot in Alyssa Slotkin's style of governing and leading that I try to embody through my campaign and through my form and style of leadership. But look, I think I want to commend President Biden for the work he's done to actually take action on the issues that young people voted for him to take action on. He's done more to help young people in this country address the student loan crisis, student debt crisis. He launched the Civilian Climate Corps, which is something that young people had advocated for, and he launched the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Those are three major steps toward addressing the issues that young people care about and have advocated for. And I think the fact that the Democratic Party has been responsive to them is a sign that we are going to deliver. That doesn't mean we've delivered everything and in the way that all young people want, but we have made progress. The second promise, though, that the president made outside of delivering on those issues was that he was going to be a bridge to the next generation of leaders. And I want to see him deliver on that promise through the 2024 election cycle, because I have not yet seen him completely deliver on that. And I think that that's where candidacies like mine, where leaders like Gretchen Whitmer and Josh Shapiro in Michigan and in Pennsylvania, respectively, Andy Beshear in Kentucky, embody some of Wes Moore in Maryland, embody some of what's ahead. And we need that bridge. We need support to bridge ourselves to that next generation of leaders, and young people need to see that the president, despite being the oldest president in American history, is going to usher in that next generation of leadership that is going to continue delivering on and expanding upon what the president has delivered on already.
One thing I do want to say, though, all those commissions that you talked about that he's done, those are all headed by and mostly are the young people that are on those commissions and working with him in the White House. So I think it's really important that he had in his administration are more young people, like you say, people under 50 than really in any administration before, except maybe Obama when he himself was under 50.
No, I think the president's really made some strong progress, and I think he's going to need to and is showing signs of continuing to make that progress for young people. Young people need to hear that and it's actually, as the president's running at the top of the ticket, the responsibility falls to folks like myself and some of the aforementioned individuals to deliver on that message to the young people to make sure that they show up and vote, but that we also earn their support in the process. And I think President Biden's done the work of earning the support. Now we need to excite people. And exciting people means electing younger folks who look like and reflect the interests, needs, and experiences of young people to office. So we're not electing people to Congress any longer who are going to ask, what is the Facebook and how does the Facebook make money?
Yeah.
About time.
Can you put the internet in this room, or is it bigger than this room? If you recall, one of the senators asked that.
Oh yes, yeah. It's surreal.
It is.
It's time, and everyone knows time. It's interesting when you and I first met. I put up a picture originally, or I was planning on putting. I don't think I actually did this. I was planning on putting up a picture of the Democratic leadership right now. At the time, it was Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden. And people said, "Oh, that's a little ageist. Don't do that." It wasn't an anti-Nancy or Chuck or Joe Biden statement. It's just a matter of like, this is where we are. We obviously are going to need something next. Right. So at the time, people kind of rejected that messaging. But now they're like, yeah, I get it. I see it. And as much as we respect the leadership of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden, we need to usher in that next generation of leadership. And so they've been doing that. People have been coming around this with the Next 50. They're coming around this with this campaign. It's why we're the leading fundraiser for this seat. And it's why I'm excited to deliver this seat for New York's 3rd Congressional District in November of 2024.
That's great. Now, I want to say to everybody listening that do not wait for a savior. You can do something to save this country yourself, including help Zach in his campaign. So we'll have links on our website, blueforyou.org.
I was supposed to say this at the beginning, zakforcongress.com.
What is it? Say it again.
I'm supposed to say this at the front end of
this.
zakforcongress.com. ZAK is how you spell my name. And if you're interested in learning more about the Next 50, it's thenext50.us.
Yes, excellent. And maybe we can help, our producer can help and put that at the beginning as well. Cool. And so we'll do that. And so if that's what you want people to do, take away. What about people who don't live in your district? Money, phone banking? Are you all doing phone banking or text messaging or anything like that?
So I guess there are 2 or 3 things here. One, of course, money is everything in a race like ours. And I want to actually articulate what money means at this stage of the race. We're not actually raising to spend in this moment because we have municipal elections coming up in November. But how much we raise now helps showcase the strength that this campaign has and is building. And as a result of that displayed strength, people will decide, the best staffers in the country will decide whether or not they want to work on this campaign. Mm-hmm. Local and national figures and organizations are going to consider whether or not they want to endorse this campaign. And then ultimately that money will be used to help us reach the most voters. So whatever folks can contribute now is actually going to have more of an impact today than any money that they would spend later. I will ask you for that money later, but it will have more of an impact now than later. 85% of our contributors in the first quarter gave $100 or less. So whatever you can give makes a big difference. But on top of that, we have really critical municipal elections this November on Long Island and in Northeast Queens. And so what I'd ask of folks is if you're in the New York area, please do consider knocking on doors with me. We're going to be knocking on doors regularly between now and the municipal elections. If you want to reach out to my campaign at info@zakforcongress.com, we'll hopefully share more opportunities for phone banking and postcard writing as well for some of those municipal elections. And then come next year, we're going to want you all on board to help us win this primary and win the general election. So money first, but if you want to volunteer, definitely reach out. And we'd love to work with you both to elect folks down ballot in this district, but then obviously deliver the congressional district in 24.
I always say to people, if 1,000 people gave $100, imagine what that would do.
Huge,
The,
huge
the
thing.
other thing that I just want to do a little thing is that I know a lot of people, and myself, I go and knock doors in different districts all over the country. When you
Yep.
go to info, it doesn't always get back to you about how you can come help actually show up and knock doors. So I'm just giving you the little bit of feedback. Not sure if your
Yeah.
campaign does
Oh no,
that.
we'll reply to that. I mean, at this point, we're
Excellent.
early enough in the campaign where if someone emails info at, we all know that it's happening because not everyone's emailing info at.
Yeah.
Maybe later on we'll give you a personal email address for that one.
Okay. All right, Zach. Well, thank you very much. And what I love is you don't even have to lie to win. You can
No.
just tell the truth about who you are and what you stand for, and people would be so smart to vote for you. So
Isn't that the
thank you
best
so much.
democratic messaging,
I
telling the
know.
truth?
Yeah, telling the truth. You tell the truth about who you are and what you believe in. And that's how people can save the democracy and save the 3rd District of New York. So thank you so much, Zach.
Thank you, Joanne. I appreciate you and all the work you're doing and have been doing.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for showing up and
Yep.
being willing to talk to us.
More to come.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Okay, folks, let me make this clear. First, don't wait for a savior to get you engaged. You can do something to save the democracy. You don't have to be Rosa Parks. Go to our website, blueforyou.org. And in terms of voting, please vote for Democrats. President Biden says it best. Don't compare me to the almighty, compare me to the alternative. So let's look at the alternative in this district. George Santos has been indicted since May. This is October, on 13 counts of fraud, theft of public funds, lying on his finance forms to the FEC, and so many more things. For months since his election, we've been swamped with all the lies he told to get elected. And this, I want you to think of this as what is part of the Republican brand, but he is pretty outrageous. He said he was Jewish and his grandparents escaped the Holocaust. Not true. Mother died in the 9/11 towers. Nope. He was a landlord of many buildings, and in fact, he wasn't, and no one even knows where he lives. He applied for COVID relief that the Biden administration created to get people back on their feet. He said in that he made $50,000. Then later he claimed he loaned his campaign $500,000 because his salary suddenly now was $750,000. He has an outstanding arrest warrant in Brazil where he was because of embezzlement. He was a well-known drag performer in Brazil, which of course he has denied. But guess what? There's these funny little things called photographs of him in his super cute outfits. He claims he went to college and grad school. He didn't do either. Says he worked on Wall Street. Nope. Before he ran, Zack talked about this. He employed a firm to do his background checking, which is a pretty typical thing when candidates are just starting out. And by the way, the parties are in on this to see what's going to come up. When all the lies he told were obvious just in that report, his aides at the time asked him to drop out. He didn't, but the Republican leadership got behind him anyway and campaigned with Santos. With all of this, only 10 members of the House has called for him to resign, mostly those who are in New York, who are in Biden districts and are so worried about their own seat. What the hell is wrong with Republicans? Can someone please let me know? Let's compare that to the current Democratic scandal in the U.S. House, in the U.S. Senate, with the Democratic Senator Robert Menendez was just indicted on 3 felony counts 2 weeks ago. Now, they're really, really bad. But within 5 days, 31 Democratic senators demanded he resign. And that's with a 1-seat advantage, but for Democratic senators. Notably, no Republican has asked Menendez to step down. Maybe it feels good to have a cheat and a thief on the other side. What is the deal? Republicans don't really care who is among them in their ranks. They just fired their Speaker of the House, the first time in the history of the United States, because he asked Democrats to help him save the economy. Republicans saw that as collaborating with the enemy. This is government, people. We have to work together. He was the third Republican Speaker of the House in the last 8 years that was driven out by their far right wing. And can I just say that 4 of those 8 years, Nancy Pelosi was the Democratic Speaker of the House. And by the way, she had all kinds of Democrats to deal with, conservative, moderate, and extremely progressive members. And yet they were able to govern because they wanted to compromise the horrors. Republicans are hell-bent on actually burning down the literal house and the government in general. They don't want to help the poor. They want to cut Social Security, Medicare, food for hungry kids, and they want to give tax breaks to the rich. President Reagan, who, by the way, couldn't get elected as a Republican in this climate, he would have to run as a Democrat. The Republicans at that time wanted to privatize all government and make their rich friends even richer, not to mention themselves. Republicans are responsible for a much higher percentage of the national debt. Turns out giving tax breaks to the rich is much more expensive to the economy than taking care of folks that need food. But let's get to the real burning down of the House and the Senate and the presidency the day of January 6th. Republicans, 1/3 of the senators and half of the House, voted to delay the vote for certifying Biden as president because they said they weren't sure he won. As a result of this lie, to this day, 63% of Republicans believe Trump won. Even after 60 lawsuits, many recounts, all run by Republicans, nothing was found that said there was any problem with the vote, except the results, the fact that Biden won by 7 million votes. Not only do Republicans want to destroy the government, they want to destroy the democracy. But that's another story for another day. And JoRanty here says democracy is in peril. I'm not the only one that believes that. Vote for Democrats. And thank you for listening.